Wait, before you scroll away. I need you to stop for just one moment. Because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that doesn't happen in movies. It happens in real life. In quiet hospital waiting rooms. In fancy ballrooms. In the hearts of people who never even knew they were connected. A 3-year-old little girl looked up at one of the most powerful men in America. A billionaire worth more than most people could ever dream of. And she asked him 5 words that stopped the entire room cold. Why do your eyes look like mine? Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Because in that one innocent question, a truth that had been buried for years, was about to rise to the surface. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Welcome back, beautiful people, to this channel, the place where real emotions live, where real stories breathe, and where every single video is designed to touch your heart in ways you never expected. Before we dive into this incredible story today, I want to ask you something. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city or your country down in the comments. I genuinely love seeing how far this community reaches. Now, what you are about to hear is one of the most emotional, heartwarming, and twist-filled stories I have ever had the privilege of sharing. It involves innocence, secrets, loss, wealth, longing, and the kind of love that refuses to stay hidden no matter how many years try to bury it. Get comfortable, because this one is going to stay with you. Sometimes the most life-changing moments begin with the smallest, most ordinary days. The morning started like any other Tuesday in Atlanta, Georgia. Maya Collins was running late. Again. She pulled her oversized tote bag over one shoulder, balanced a travel mug of coffee in her other hand, and turned back to grab her 3-year-old daughter Zoe, who was standing in the middle of their small apartment hallway, very seriously trying to put both feet into one shoe. "Baby, we don't have time for that," Maya said softly, kneeling down and helping Zoe into her sneakers, tiny pink ones with little stars on the sides. Zoe looked up at her with enormous brown eyes. Eyes that always made Maya pause. Eyes that didn't quite look like hers. Eyes that were warm and deep and somehow familiar in a way Maya had never been able to fully explain. She pushed the thought away. She always pushed that thought away. Maya was 26 years old. She worked as a catering staff coordinator for a prestigious events company in Atlanta called Premier Touch Events. It wasn't glamorous work. She managed schedules, supervised servers, made sure napkins were folded the right way, and that champagne glasses were never less than half full. But it paid enough. Just barely enough to keep their small 2-bedroom apartment, afford Zoe's daycare, and occasionally treat themselves to ice cream on Friday nights. Life was tight, but it was theirs. Maya had raised Zoe completely alone since the day she was born. There was no father in the picture. There had been someone once, someone she had loved deeply and completely, but that chapter had closed before Zoe ever took her first breath. Maya never talked about it. Not to her co-workers. Not even to her mother, who lived 3 states away in Memphis and called every Sunday to ask if Maya was eating properly and trusting the Lord. Some stories, Maya believed, were better left sealed. That Tuesday, Maya had received an unusual assignment. Her boss, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia, had pulled her aside the evening before and handed her a printed briefing sheet. "Tomorrow's event is big, Maya. I mean big." Patricia had lowered her reading glasses and looked at her seriously. "The client is Elliot Hargrove." Maya had blinked. The Elliot Hargrove. The one and only. Elliot Hargrove. The name was impossible to escape if you lived in Atlanta. He was 38 years old, the founder of 2 tech companies, a real estate empire, and a charitable foundation that had reportedly donated over $400 million to education initiatives across the American South. He was on magazine covers. He was in newspapers. He had spoken at the White House twice. He was also, by every public account, a deeply private and somewhat lonely man. He had never married. He had no children, at least none that anyone knew about. He rarely gave personal interviews. Whenever journalists pushed into his personal life, he gave the same quiet, composed answer. I keep that part of myself for myself. Maya had nodded at Patricia and taken the briefing sheet. It was a private fundraising dinner. 40 guests. Black tie. His personal estate in Buckhead, one of Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhoods. You'll be running point on floor coordination, Patricia had told her. And Maya, because the event childcare fell through last minute, and we can't find a replacement in time, you may need to bring Zoe. Keep her in the side room with the assistant. She'll be fine. But please keep her out of the main hall. Maya had hesitated. She hated bringing Zoe to work. But she had no other option on such short notice. So here they were. Tuesday morning. Pink Star sneakers. One travel mug. One enormous tote bag. And a day that neither of them would ever forget. Have you ever had a regular day that turned out to be the most important day of your entire life? Keep that thought close. Because Maya was about to have hers. The most dangerous moments are the ones that look perfectly normal on the outside. The Hargrove estate was everything Maya had expected, and still somehow more than she had prepared for. The driveway alone was longer than her entire street. Iron gates. Manicured hedges trimmed into geometric perfection. A fountain at the center of the circular drive where water arced quietly into a stone basin surrounded by white roses. Maya pulled her small Honda into the designated staff parking area and sat for a moment before getting out. Pretty, Zoe said simply from her car seat, pressing her little face against the window. Yeah, baby, Maya agreed quietly. It is. The interior of the estate was even more breathtaking. High ceilings with soft gold lighting. Dark hardwood floors. Original paintings on the walls. Not prints, not copies, originals, in heavy gilded frames. The main dining hall was already being set by the early crew, white tablecloths being smoothed out, crystal glassware being polished to a mirror finish. Maya got straight to work. She handed Zoe off to the assistant, a gentle college student named Brianna, who had set up a small comfortable area in a side sitting room off the main hall. Blankets, snacks, a tablet with cartoons loaded. She'll be good in here, Brianna said, smiling at Zoe. Zoe looked up at Maya with those enormous brown eyes. You coming back? Always, Maya said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Always, always, always. She straightened up, put on her professional face, and walked into the controlled chaos of final event preparation. For the next 4 hours, Maya was everywhere at once. Adjusting centerpieces, coordinating with the kitchen, confirming the dietary requirements for each of the 40 guests, redirecting a server who kept walking on the wrong side of the table. It was the kind of controlled, high-pressure work she was genuinely good at, the kind that required a person to hold 100 small details in their head simultaneously while appearing completely calm. She barely noticed when the guests began arriving at 7. She noticed even less when Elliot Hargrove walked into the room. She was crouched behind the bar station reviewing a supply list when Patricia appeared at her elbow and whispered. He just arrived. Main entrance. Please make sure someone greets him. Maya straightened, turned, and saw him across the hall. Elliot Hargrove was tall. That was her first impression. Tall, well-dressed in a perfectly fitted black suit, with close-cropped natural hair and a jawline that looked like it had been sculpted carefully. He was shaking hands with his arriving guests with the quiet, measured warmth of a man who was deeply used to commanding rooms without needing to shout. Maya looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then she went back to her clipboard. She had no reason to look longer. She had no reason to feel the strange, hollow ache that passed through her chest in that moment like a ghost. She ignored it. She was good at ignoring things. The dinner proceeded beautifully. Courses were timed perfectly. Conversations hummed. Wine glasses stayed appropriately filled. Maya moved through the room like a quiet current, present but invisible, the way excellent event staff always are. It was close to 9 o'clock when things shifted. Brianna appeared at the entrance to the hall with wide eyes and a look that said, "I am so sorry." And beside her, holding her hand loosely and looking entirely unbothered, was Zoe. She had wandered out. Course she had. Zoe had always been, as Maya's mother put it, curious to a fault. Maya moved quickly, crossing the hall in long quiet strides, reaching for her daughter, but it was already too late. Because Zoe had already walked directly to the head of the table. She was standing beside Elliot Hargrove's chair, looking up at him with a kind of fearless, open attention that only very small children and very honest people ever manage. The table had gone quietly still. And then Zoe spoke. "Why do your eyes look like mine? What would you do if you were in that room in that moment? As a parent, as a stranger, as the man sitting in that chair?" There are questions that children ask that adults have spent their entire lives trying not to answer. The dining room had gone the kind of quiet that has weight to it. Not the polite quiet of a pause in conversation. The deep, motionless quiet of 40 people collectively holding their breath. Maya reached her daughter in seconds, her face burning with professional embarrassment. "Zoe, baby, I'm so sorry," she started, reaching down to lift her daughter away. But Elliot Hargrove had raised one hand. "Gently. Only." "It's all right," he said. His voice was low and measured. But his eyes, those eyes that Zoe had just pointed out with all the surgical precision of a 3-year-old, those eyes were doing something complicated. Something that didn't match the composure of the rest of his face. He looked at Zoe. Zoe looked at him. She reached up one small hand and pointed directly at his left eye. "Brown. Like mine." She pointed at her own eye. "See." Someone at the table made a small sound. Half laugh. Half something else entirely. Elliot Hargrove looked at Maya. And the world tilted. Maya felt it the moment their eyes met across her daughter's small tilted-up face. A feeling like a key turning in a lock she had forgotten existed inside her chest. Her mouth went dry. Her clipboard lowered slowly to her side. The elegant dining room, the 40 guests, the crystal glasses and the white roses, all of it blurred softly at the edges. She knew his face. She had known his face for years. Not from magazines. Not from newspapers. From before. From a different version of both of them. From a summer in Washington, D.C. 7 years ago, when Maya was 19 years old and had taken a 2-month internship with a non-profit urban development organization. When she had met a 29-year-old man named Eli. Quiet, brilliant, passionate about communities and education and justice, who had been volunteering at the same organization under a name he never fully explained. Eli. Short for Elliot. They had fallen deeply, completely in love over 8 weeks. The kind of love that doesn't know it's temporary while it's happening. The kind that feels like it was always supposed to exist. And then his world had crashed back in. His family. His company. His obligations. He had left suddenly. Not cruelly but completely. A goodbye that felt like a wall going up. Phone number that stopped working. A silence that stretched from weeks into months into years. Maya had discovered she was pregnant 6 weeks after he disappeared. She had made her decision alone. She had built her life alone. She had never told anyone who Zoe's father was. Not because she was bitter, but because she believed, truly deeply believed, that a man who left that completely didn't deserve to be found. But now he was sitting 4 feet away from her in a black suit and a room full of flowers. And their daughter was standing between them with her hand pointing at his eye. Elliot's composure had not broken. Not visibly. But his voice, when he spoke again, was very slightly different. "What's your name?" he asked Zoe. "Zoe," she said immediately with complete confidence. "That's a beautiful name." He paused. Then carefully. "And what's your mama's name?" Zoe turned and pointed at Maya. "That's my mama. Her name is Maya." Something crossed Elliot Hargrove's face then, fast as lightning, gone just as quickly. But Maya saw it. She had always been good at reading things people tried to hide. He looked at Maya again. And this time the question in his eyes wasn't hidden at all. Would you forgive someone who left you in silence, even if the reason was more complicated than you ever knew? Think about that. 'Cause what comes next changes everything. The truth doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives in the space between two people who already know. Maya excused herself from the room quietly and professionally, scooping Zoe into her arms and returning her to Brianna with a murmured apology and a face that she hoped, desperately, revealed nothing. She spent the remaining 40 minutes of the dinner on autopilot, clipboard in hand, professional smile intact, every nerve in her body pulled tight like a wire. She was almost to the door, coat in hand, Zoe sleepy against her shoulder, when Patricia appeared and said, "Mr. Hargrove has requested to speak with the floor coordinator before you leave. He said it's regarding the event organization." Maya stood very still. "It's probably just a compliment," Patricia said, slightly puzzled by Maya's expression. "You did exceptional work tonight." Maya nodded, set Zoe down carefully on a nearby settee with Brianna, and walked to the small private study where a staff member pointed her. He was standing at the window when she walked in. The room was quiet and warm, books on every wall, a single lamp burning amber. He turned when she closed the door. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Maya said very quietly, "Eli." The name landed in the room like something fragile being set down. "Maya." His voice broke slightly on the single syllable. "Just slightly. I have thought about you for years." She lifted her chin. "Don't. I know I have no right." "You have no right," she agreed. Her voice was steady. She had practiced being steady for a very long time. "You disappeared. You made a choice. I was told." He stopped, pressed his hand flat against the windowsill. "My family found out about us. I was 29 and completely under the control of a company my father had built. They told me you had been paid. They told me you had agreed to walk away. They showed me." His jaw tightened. "Documents that I believed. Because I was a coward. Because it was easier than fighting." He looked at her directly. "I have been trying to find you for 4 years. Hired someone. Your information had changed completely." Maya stared at him. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quietly. "I'm not asking for anything. I just need to know." His voice dropped. "Is she mine?" The room was completely silent. Maya looked at the man who had once held her heart in both hands and chosen, in one terrible moment, to believe a lie rather than fight for the truth. Who had spent the years since apparently fighting his way back. Who was standing in his own home looking at her with the most exposed, unguarded expression she had ever seen on a powerful face. She thought about Zoe. About pink star sneakers. About brown eyes. About a question that a 3-year-old had asked with perfect, innocent accuracy. "Why do your eyes look like mine?" "Yes," Maya said. "She's yours." The sound that came from Elliot Hargrove then was not loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was small and quiet and completely broken open, the sound of a man who had been carrying the weight of a loss he hadn't fully understood for nearly 4 years, finally setting it down. He sat on the edge of the desk and lowered his face into his hands. Maya didn't move. But she didn't leave either. If someone you once loved came back with an explanation that changed the story you had believed for years, would you be able to open that door again? Even just a little. The bravest thing two people can do is begin again, not as who they were, but as who they have become. Maya didn't forgive him that night. That would be dishonest, and this story deserves honesty. What happened that night was something quieter and more important than forgiveness. What happened was that two people sat across from each other in a warm, book-lined room in Atlanta and told each other the truth. Maybe for the first time in the entire history of knowing each other. Maya told him what it had been like to be 19, pregnant, and completely alone. what it had been like to build a life from scratch. What it had felt like to look at Zoe's eyes every single day and see a ghost. She didn't soften it. He didn't ask her to. Elliot told her about the years after. The family battle that had eventually led to him buying out every relative who had used his company as a weapon. The foundation he had built, partly, he admitted, out of guilt. Partly out of a desperate need to do something meaningful with a life that had felt hollow since that summer in D.C. They talked for 2 hours. Brianna, bless her, kept Zoe happily occupied with her tablet and a quiet snack. At the end of it, Elliot looked at Maya and said, "I don't expect anything. I want you to know that. I have no claim on your life. But I would like, if you would allow it, to know her. To be present. To try to be whatever she needs me to be. Even if that starts as nothing more than a stranger she sometimes sees." Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up, walked to the door of the study, and opened it. Zoe immediately slid off the settee and padded across the hallway in her star sneakers and came to stand beside Maya's leg, looking curiously at the man still sitting on the edge of the desk. "Zoe," Maya said carefully. "This is Elliot. He's someone important." Zoe studied him for a moment with a serious evaluation that small children apply to everything. Then she walked directly up to him, held up both arms and said, "Up." The command of a child who has already decided. Elliot Hargrove, billionaire, founder, one of the most powerful men in Atlanta, picked up his 3-year-old daughter for the very first time with hands that weren't entirely steady, and held her like she was made of everything he had ever been searching for. Zoe put one small hand on his cheek, looked at him closely, then said with enormous satisfaction, "Same eyes." And that was where it began. It didn't become a fairy tale overnight. Life doesn't work that way, and this story is too honest to pretend otherwise. There were legal conversations. There were difficult moments. There were months where Maya and Elliot rebuilt trust the way you rebuild anything that has been broken. Slowly, carefully, one piece at a time. But Zoe grew up knowing both of them. She grew up knowing her history. All of it, told to her with honesty and with love. She grew up with pink star sneakers and then red ones and then one she picked out herself. And she grew up understanding that families look like 1,000 different things, and the only ingredient that isn't optional is love. Elliot restructured his foundation's education initiative with Maya's input. She had ideas, it turned out, that his boardroom had never thought of, because she had lived the reality his foundation was trying to address. She eventually left the catering company. Not because he asked her to. Because she finally had the support and the resources to pursue the non-profit career she had always dreamed of. They found their way back to each other. Slowly. On their own terms. The way things that are real usually do. And at the center of all of it, unconcerned, unimpressed by wealth, completely in charge of every room she walked into, was a little girl with brown eyes that held a question that had changed everything. "Why do your eyes look like mine?" Because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive in a courtroom or a confrontation. Sometimes it arrives in the voice of a 3-year-old who hasn't yet learned that some questions are supposed to stay silent. And thank God for that. The lesson in this story isn't about wealth. It isn't about second chances, though those matter deeply. The real lesson is this. Innocence sees what adults have learned to overlook. Children don't carry the weight of pride or shame or carefully constructed silence. They walk into rooms and they ask the questions that everyone else in the room has been afraid to ask for years. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, those questions crack open the walls we built around the truth and let in the light. If you are carrying a truth right now that you have been afraid to speak, in a relationship, in a family, in your own heart, maybe today is the day you let the child in you ask the question. Because the answer might just change everything. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, please hit that like button. It genuinely means everything to this channel and helps this story reach someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe if you haven't already, because every single week we bring you stories just like this one. Emotional, real, and deeply human. And drop a comment below. I want to know, What part of this story hit you the hardest? Was it Maya's strength, Zoe's question, or Elliot's moment of finally letting go? Share this video with someone you love, because some stories deserve to travel. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.